The kiss wasn't supposed to happen. Not in the middle of their heated argument about the Henderson account, not with the entire marketing department watching through the glass walls of her office, and certainly not when James had promised his daughter he'd never let work complicate their lives again. But as Victoria's lips pressed against his, silencing his protests about her impossible deadlines, James knew everything was about to change. And he wasn't sure if he could protect his heart this time. 3 months earlier, James Collins had been desperate. After his ex-wife abandoned their family for a finding herself journey across Europe, he'd been juggling single parenthood and a failing freelance career. The job offer from Pinnacle Marketing had seemed like salvation, until he met Victoria Winters, the Ice Queen CEO with standards so exacting that the company had cycled through 4 marketing directors in the past year alone. What James didn't know then was that Victoria harbored a secret that would eventually bring their worlds crashing together in ways neither could have imagined. "Daddy, you're going to be late again," 8-year-old Lily reminded him, her small fingers straightening his tie as he rushed around their apartment. "Ms. Winters is going to make that scary face." James chuckled despite his anxiety. "The one where her left eyebrow goes up and her lips get all pinched?" Lily nodded solemnly. "That's her I'm disappointed in you face. Sophie from daycare says her mom worked for Ms. Winters and cried every day." "Well, I promise not to cry," James said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "Mrs. Peterson will be here in 5 minutes to take you to school." "Homework?" "In my backpack." "Lunch?" "You forgot again, didn't you?" Lily sighed with the infinite patience of a child who had grown up too quickly. James felt the familiar stab of guilt. "I'll leave money with Mrs. Peterson." "Pizza day?" Lily's smile returned. "Pizza day." As he rushed out the door, James had no idea that today would be the day Victoria Winters would finally push him too far, or that beneath her perfectly tailored suits and icy demeanor lay a woman with wounds that mirrored his own. Victoria Winters stood at her office window, watching the city wake up below. At 34, she had built Pinnacle Marketing from nothing into one of the most sought-after agencies in the city. Her long, silky dark hair was pulled back in its usual severe bun, her white skin nearly luminous in the morning light. She had everything she'd ever wanted professionally, and nothing she needed personally. When her assistant announced James Collins was waiting, Victoria straightened her already impeccable posture. Something about the new marketing director unsettled her. Perhaps it was the way he challenged her when everyone else cowered, or how his sharp wit matched her own. Or maybe it was how his eyes softened whenever he mentioned his daughter, revealing a depth of feeling Victoria had long ago locked away. "You're late, Collins," she said without turning around. "Good morning to you too, Victoria," James replied, his voice carrying that hint of amusement that invariably irritated her. "Traffic was a nightmare. The Henderson presentation is tomorrow, and I need those revisions by noon." James set his coffee down harder than necessary. "The revisions you requested at 11 p.m. last night? The ones that require completely restructuring the campaign we've spent 3 weeks developing?" Victoria finally turned, taking in his appearance. Despite his obvious rush, James looked frustratingly put together. His fair skin was slightly flushed from hurrying, and his dark hair had that deliberately tousled look that somehow appeared both professional and carefree. His athletic build was evident even beneath his well-fitted shirt and blazer, a fact Victoria immediately forced herself to ignore. "Is there a problem?" she asked coolly. "Besides the impossible deadlines, constant revisions, and your apparent belief that none of us have lives outside this office?" James countered, his charm momentarily eclipsed by frustration. "No, no problem at all." What neither of them realized was that their confrontation was being observed by someone who would soon change everything. The morning deteriorated from there. By lunchtime, the tension between them had reached a breaking point. James had been fielding anxious texts from Lily's school about a sudden fever, while simultaneously trying to meet Victoria's demands. When Victoria dismissed his request to leave early with a curt, "The Henderson account doesn't care about your personal problems," something inside James snapped. The argument that followed was spectacular. Years of James's pent-up frustration about balancing fatherhood with career expectations collided with Victoria's rigid standards and hidden insecurities. Words were exchanged that couldn't be taken back, vulnerabilities exposed that neither had intended to reveal. "You have no idea what it's like," James finally shouted. "To be everything for someone, to know that if you fail, it's not just you who suffers." Victoria went very still. "You think I don't understand sacrifice? You think I became this," she gestured to her office, to herself, "without losing everything that mattered?" Something in her voice made James pause. For the first time, he saw beyond the perfect exterior to the pain beneath. And in that moment of recognition, Victoria did the unthinkable. She kissed him. The office fell silent. Through the glass walls, the entire marketing department froze in collective shock. James stood perfectly still, caught between his anger and a sudden, overwhelming awareness of Victoria, her scent, the softness of her lips, the slight tremor in her hands as they gripped his shirt. When they broke apart, Victoria's carefully constructed facade had crumbled. Without a word, she grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving James standing alone in her office with the taste of her still on his lips and a decision that would affect not just his career, but his daughter's stability and his carefully guarded heart. What James didn't know as he watched Victoria disappear into the elevator was that she was heading to the same place he needed to be. Westside Elementary School, where Lily Collins sat in the nurse's office with a fever, and where Victoria Winters volunteered every Wednesday afternoon reading to children who, like her, had once felt abandoned. Their worlds were about to collide in ways neither could have anticipated, forcing them to confront not just their feelings for each other, but the painful pasts they'd both been running from. The school nurse looked up in confusion when both James and Victoria arrived simultaneously at her office door. "Mr. Collins, we've been trying to reach you," the nurse began, then noticed Victoria. "Ms. Winters, I didn't realize you knew each other. Lily's been asking for you." James turned to Victoria in confusion. "You know my daughter?" Victoria's composed expression faltered. "I'm her Wednesday reading volunteer. She never mentioned her last name, and I..." She stopped, suddenly vulnerable in a way James had never seen. "She reminds me of myself at that age." Before James could process this revelation, Lily's small voice called out from behind the nurse's partition. "Daddy? Is that Victoria?" The look of genuine affection that transformed Victoria's face as she moved toward Lily's cot stunned James more than their kiss had. He watched as this woman, who had terrorized her employees and driven him to the brink of quitting multiple times, gently brushed hair from his daughter's forehead and spoke in soft tones he'd never heard her use. "Hey, bookworm," Victoria said. "Heard you're not feeling well." Lily's eyes widened as she looked between her father and Victoria. "Do you know my dad?" Victoria glanced at James, something unreadable passing between them. "He works with me." "Is he always late?" Lily asked with the innocent directness of children. Victoria's laugh. A real laugh, not the polite, controlled sound James had occasionally heard at client meetings, filled the small office. "Always. That's because he has to do everything by himself," Lily explained seriously. "Mom left us to find herself, but she's been looking for a really long time." James felt his chest tighten at his daughter's matter-of-fact description of their abandonment. But it was Victoria's reaction that caught him off guard. The flash of pain, quickly masked, and the gentle way she took Lily's hand. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love," Victoria said carefully. "It's not because of anything you did." "That's what Daddy says too," Lily replied. "Are you mad at him?" "He said you make everyone cry." James winced, but Victoria's eyes met his over Lily's head, and to his surprise, there was a hint of amusement there. "I think your dad and I just need to understand each other better," Victoria said. As James drove home with a drowsy Lily in the back seat and Victoria's business card with her personal number written on the back burning a hole in his pocket, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything had shifted. The woman he'd been fighting with for months had shown him a side of herself that changed everything. And now he had to decide whether to risk his heart, his job, and his daughter's emotional well-being on the possibility that the real Victoria Winters was the woman he'd glimpsed today, not the ice queen who had made his professional life hell. What he didn't know was that Victoria was sitting in her car in the school parking lot, unable to drive away, wrestling with her own demons and the walls she'd built to protect herself after her own childhood trauma. Walls that a precocious 8-year-old and her frustratingly principled father had somehow breached without even trying. The next morning, James arrived at the office early, the Henderson presentation polished and ready, his mind made up. He would maintain professional boundaries with Victoria, thank her for helping with Lily, and make it clear that whatever happened in her office was a mistake that wouldn't be repeated. But when he walked into the conference room, he found it empty except for Victoria, who stood by the window looking more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. "The meeting's been pushed to this afternoon," she said before he could speak. "I wanted to talk to you first." James set down his materials, keeping the conference table between them. "About yesterday." "I've been unfair to you," Victoria interrupted. "To everyone, but especially to you." The admission was so unexpected that James momentarily lost his prepared speech. Victoria Winters didn't apologize, she demanded, she directed, she occasionally praised, but she never admitted fault. "I built this company by never accepting excuses from myself, and I've expected the same from everyone around me," she continued. "But yesterday, seeing you with Lily." She paused, visibly struggling. "My mother left when I was 9. My father buried himself in work rather than deal with raising me alone. I swore I'd never be vulnerable like that again." James felt his carefully constructed resolve weakening. "Victoria. I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to understand. And to tell you that effective immediately, Pinnacle will be implementing new family-friendly policies, starting with flexible hours for parents and an emergency childcare program." James stared at her, trying to reconcile this woman with the demanding CEO he'd been battling for months. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria's professional mask slipped, revealing a glimpse of raw honesty. "Because Lily told me you're her hero. Because you've been fighting battles I didn't even know existed. Because," she hesitated, then finished softly, "because you make me want to be better." The tension between them shifted, no longer antagonistic but charged with something far more dangerous. James knew he should maintain his distance, protect his heart and Lily's from another potential abandonment. But as Victoria took a tentative step toward him, he found himself moving to meet her. "I can't promise this will be easy," he said quietly. "Lily has to come first." Victoria nodded. "I wouldn't respect you if she didn't." Their second kiss was nothing like their first. Not born from frustration and impulse, but from a fragile, tentative understanding that they were both damaged, both scared, and both willing to risk pain for the possibility of something real. What neither of them saw was Lily's face pressed against the glass door of the conference room, her fever forgotten in the excitement of seeing her father and her favorite reading volunteer together, her 8-year-old mind already planning their perfect family future. The months that followed weren't smooth. Victoria's transformation from demanding boss to empathetic leader had its setbacks. James struggled to trust that she wouldn't revert to her old ways or abandon them when things got difficult. Lily, initially thrilled at the developing relationship, began testing boundaries and acting out as she processed her complicated feelings about her mother's absence and Victoria's presence. Their first real date ended with an emergency call from the babysitter about Lily's nightmare. Their first attempt at a family outing was derailed by a client crisis. Victoria's instinct to control situations clashed with James's protective parenting style. His fear of depending on anyone battled with his growing feelings for her. But through it all, something beautiful was forming. A relationship built not on perfect romance, but on the messy reality of two people healing together, learning to trust again, and creating a family from broken pieces. It was on a rainy Tuesday evening, 4 months into their relationship, when the past came crashing back into their lives. James was cooking dinner while Victoria helped Lily with her science project at the kitchen table. The domesticity of the scene. Victoria, with her hair down, wearing jeans instead of her usual tailored suits, patiently explaining the water cycle to an attentive Lily, made James's heart swell. This was the family he'd never dared hope for after his wife left. The doorbell rang, interrupting their peaceful evening. "I'll get it," James called, turning down the heat under the pasta sauce. When he opened the door, the world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. Standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain and looking thinner than he remembered, was Eliza, Lily's mother. "James," she said, her voice achingly familiar. "I'm back." For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't process the reality of his ex-wife standing before him after nearly 2 years of absence. 2 years of Lily crying herself to sleep, of birthday cards that arrived weeks late, of promises for video calls that never happened. "What are you doing here?" He finally managed, his voice low to prevent Lily from hearing. "I made a mistake," Eliza said, pushing wet hair from her face. "I've been in therapy. I'm better now. I want to see my daughter." James felt a presence behind him and turned to find Victoria standing there, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes alert with concern. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. The look of confusion on Eliza's face quickly transformed into understanding as she glanced between them. "I see you didn't waste time replacing me." The unfairness of the accusation stung, but before James could respond, a small voice from the hallway froze them all. "Mom?" Lily stood there, her science project forgotten, eyes wide with disbelief and a complex mixture of emotions that no 9-year-old should have to process: hope, hurt, confusion, and fear, all battling for dominance. "Lily Pad," Eliza breathed, using the nickname she'd given their daughter as a baby. "Look how big you've gotten." James felt Victoria's hand slip into his, a silent gesture of support that gave him strength. This was the moment he'd both dreaded and hoped for. Eliza's return would either heal Lily's wounds or deepen them. And now Victoria was caught in the middle of their broken family's reunion. The next few hours were a blur of tense conversation, Lily's cautious excitement, and the unspoken question hanging in the air: what did Eliza's return mean for all of them? James watched as Victoria quietly excused herself, giving them space for this family moment, and felt a pang of fear that this complication might be too much for their still fragile relationship. Later that night, after Eliza had left with plans to meet Lily for lunch the following weekend, James found Victoria sitting on his balcony, staring out at the city lights. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting beside her. "I had no idea she was coming back." Victoria turned to him, her expression vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed. "Do you still love her?" The question caught him off guard. "No," he answered honestly. "That ended long before she physically left. But she's Lily's mother. And Lily needs her mother," Victoria finished for him, a hint of resignation in her voice. James took her hand. "Lily needs people who love her consistently and completely. Eliza has a lot to prove on that front." He paused, gathering courage. "And I need you." Victoria's eyes glistened in the dim light. "I've never done this before, been part of a family with all its complications. I'm not sure I know how." "Neither do I," James admitted. "But I think that's the point. We figure it out together." Victoria leaned into him, her usual composure giving way to vulnerability. "What if I'm not enough? What if I can't be what Lily needs?" James wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You already are. You've been there for her in ways Eliza never was, even before we were together. You show up. You listen. You care. As they sat together under the night sky, facing this unexpected challenge, James realized that what had begun as an impossible working relationship had evolved into something stronger than he could have imagined, a partnership capable of weathering storms, including the hurricane that was his ex-wife's return. "I'm scared," Victoria admitted, the words clearly difficult for a woman who had built her life around never showing weakness. "I've never had something this precious to lose before." James turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "When Eliza left, I thought my world was ending. But looking back now, I realize it was just changing. And that change brought you to us." He squeezed her hands. "Whatever happens with Eliza, whatever role she plays in Lily's life going forward, it doesn't change what we're building together." Victoria took a deep breath, her usual confidence slowly returning. "I've faced down billion-dollar clients and cutthroat competitors. I can handle one ex-wife." James laughed softly, relieved to see a glimpse of the formidable woman he'd fallen for. "That's the Victoria Winters I know. Besides," she added with unexpected gentleness, "Lily deserves to have all the love possible in her life. If Eliza is truly committed to being a mother again, I won't stand in the way of that." The selflessness of her statement touched James deeply. This was so far from the cold, demanding boss he'd first met. This woman who would put a child's needs above her own feelings, who would face her own abandonment issues to help his daughter heal. "I love you," he said, the words emerging naturally, without planning or hesitation. "I love you, Victoria Winters." Her eyes widened slightly, it was the first time he'd said those words to her. For a moment, she was silent, and James felt a flicker of uncertainty. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Both of you. And I'm not going anywhere." As they held each other under the stars, James knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, co-parenting with Eliza, helping Lily navigate her complicated feelings, balancing their work and personal lives, they would face them together. The impossible boss who had once made his life hell had become the partner who made his life whole. 6 months after their first kiss, the Pinnacle marketing office gathered to celebrate not just the company's most successful year to date, but also to toast their CEO's engagement. As Victoria stood beside James and Lily, her once perfect exterior had softened into something more real, her hair often loose now, her smile more frequent, her legendary standards still high but tempered with humanity. "I used to think vulnerability was weakness," Victoria told the crowd, her hand firmly clasped in James's. "I built walls to protect myself and called it strength. It took a stubborn marketing director and an even more stubborn 8-year-old to show me that real strength comes from opening yourself to possibility, even when it's terrifying." James squeezed her hand, remembering their journey. The arguments that had become passionate discussions, the late nights working side by side after Lily was asleep, the gradual building of trust, and the family they were creating together. To possibility, he toasted, looking at the woman who had gone from his impossible boss to the love of his life. Victoria's eyes shimmered with tears as she raised her glass. "To family, the ones we're born with and the ones we choose." As they celebrated surrounded by friends and colleagues, James reflected on how sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most difficult starts, and how a kiss in the middle of an argument had changed everything. If you've enjoyed this story of unexpected love and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content that reminds us all that it's never too late to open your heart again. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below and join our growing community of romance lovers.